Welcome back. You're watching HFO-TV.
Hi, it's Greg Frick again for HFO-TV. Welcome back. Today we're going to speak with Scott Bailey, the regional economist for the State of Washington Employment Security Department. Thanks, Scott, for coming.
You bet. Thank you.
We want to discuss a little bit about, Clark County. We get a lot of questions about, is there a difference, and how do we look at Clark County from a multifamily investment side? And as we tell people, it's really just a sub-market or a suburb or part of the Portland PMSA. But there's some uniqueness with Clark, and I think we wanted to get a little more in depth of kind of what's gone on in the past, where we see it today, and maybe some projections from your standpoint in the future in terms of job growth, wages, and housing, both on the multifamily and single-family side. So maybe you can give a little background on your history, and then we can kind of get into that.
Right. So I'm actually a Portland native and still live in Portland.
So you crossed the bridge?
Yes. The right way.
Yes.
I wave at the parking lot going back. But that number is increasing, actually, and I wouldn't be surprised if over time it's like Washington County, which used to be one way into Portland in the morning and out, and now is backed up
both ways,
24/7.
Yes.
So, and I've been doing that for 25 years.
Okay.
Yeah.
And so from that standpoint, that's kind of, so in saying those numbers are increasing, we're thinking with the more residents living in Portland, commuting to Vancouver or Clark County from a job standpoint, as opposed to the other way around 5 years ago?
Right. The commuting is actually growing in both directions.
Okay.
But faster in the Portland to Vancouver direction.
Okay. And how is Southwest Washington doing in comparison to Portland in terms of, job growth, immigration, and those things?
Yeah, it's doing great right now. So our job growth over the year is just short of 4%.
Okay.
And really the whole western U.S., eight of the top 10 states in terms of job growth in the nation are in the West, and Washington's number 2, and Oregon's like 4 or 5 or something like that. So, and Portland's growing fast, Clark County's growing fast as part of that, faster than right around the state average as well.
So Clark County is matching the state average for the state of Washington?
Yeah, and that state average is, of course, King County is going crazy.
Right. And then in terms of, there's specific industries that where Clark County is recovering kind of post-recession in terms of types of jobs and employment levels?
It's actually been really broad-based.
Okay.
So it's very diverse across the board, and sort of at different points in time, one industry growing faster than the other. So construction is growing pretty rapidly right now. So nationally, employment is growing about 2%, and that's really pretty good.
Right.
And we're close to 4%. Construction in Clark County is growing at about 6% right now, and it's cooled off a little bit, and that's still pretty good.
No, that's really good. And what about wages in Clark County?
It's like everywhere else. We keep looking for wage growth, and it's just keeping up with inflation, basically.
Right, okay.
Now we have official numbers through 2013. It's kind of there's a lag time before we get the data, but I took a sneak peek at 2014, and it looks like kind of more of the same.
So we're saying just kind of keeping in place with inflation. So.
And that's because there's still a lot of slack in the job market.
Yeah.
The unemployment rate isn't the best indicator right now. We know there's a lot of people who dropped out of the labor market. They're starting to trickle back in, but we still have quite a backlog to make up.
And then I've got a question just in thinking about wage growth. How, when somebody looks at Portland PMSA for job growth and wage, and how do you as an economist deal with the different tax structures state to state? Oregon has an income tax, Washington doesn't. So is there an adjustment in that when we're comparing wages in Portland with wages in Vancouver?
So wages tend to be, and I think this is true of most areas, the central city tends to have higher wages, in part because of the tighter labor market, in part because of the occupational structure. You get the professional services tend to be concentrated in the central city, and those tend to be higher wages. What we're seeing in Clark County, and we've seen some of that in Washington County as well, is those kind of a sea change starting out, where you look at some of the companies that have expanded there. Fisher Investment, very high-end global financial company. Manfield Veterinary Pet Hospital headquarters about to move over. They're under construction there. Again, high-wage jobs. Peace Health Medical Group having their headquarters there, moving their headquarters there. And that's kind of a sea change of more management professional jobs there. That's going to kind of diversify the wage structure. And then when we look ahead as to what's coming down in terms of projects around the Vancouver waterfront.
Yes.
So the pre-application has gone in for building 2 apartment towers there, along with a couple of restaurants. The master plan for that looks fabulous.
The old Boise Cascade side.
Yep.
Yeah.
It's really going to be a game changer
Right.
for Vancouver and for downtown Vancouver. And I've heard there's kind of starting to see some action in terms of property turnover in Vancouver, downtown, now that they're seeing this is really going to happen. Is this really going to happen? Yeah, it's really going to happen, and it's going to be a big change.
And what's your take on the, there's been talk for years about the I-5 bridge, and I mean, is it? I mean, because we actually talked to some landowners down there that are right on the I-5, and hey, we're far enough north. Even if there is something done with the bridge, it's not going to affect us. It's just kind of, is it a wait and see? As you said, the reverse commute's getting worse. At some point,
it's going to be a while before anything happens. I think so much money got spent with no product that it's going to be a while before people come back to the table and try to make a go of that again.
Okay. And now in Portland, we've seen this recovery. The city of Portland itself has been the driver in terms of immigration and wage growth and job growth. It's not Washington County; it's really the city of Portland.
Right.
Are you seeing that same trend? I mean, we brought up the Boise Cascade site, which is downtown, in Clark County, where you're seeing this demand in the core by services, because historically Clark County's kind of grown east and north, where you've got towards Camas and Washougal. And are you seeing it now coming back to a revitalization of downtown, or is that?
It's still pretty much, we're seeing population growth. Ridgefield has had some housing development there, so they've been growing really quickly. Battleground was the leader and is still growing, and Camas, there's still a lot going on. So the cities are all doing pretty well. Okay.
And then in terms of, in the last kind of boom market, Clark County, Vancouver in particular, had a lot of single-family starter construction and homes, affordable homes. And what we saw the effect on the apartment side was tendency to have a little bit higher vacancy. We saw the same thing out in East County in Portland because there's more options and you're competing on that starter home. Is that changed in this kind of ramp up of construction? We seeing higher end homes to try to capture that higher end wage earner, or is it kind of still back to kind of a lower first home type buyer?
No, I don't think there's very much affordable single fam being built there.
Okay.
So what we're seeing the first 6 months of this year in terms of permits, the permit level is up in terms of number of units.
Right.
But instead of it being historically been about 15% multifam, it's more like 35% this year. So a whole lot of apartment stuff. And the single family is still well under its historic average, even going back to the late 90s.
Okay. And that multifamily, in that it's kind of spread out all over, as we talked about. There's some in Battleground. It's kind of spread all over. Where it seems in Portland, so to speak, we've got a huge mass within the core, then some out in Washington County, kind of tied towards Intel and Nike. Right. Whereas Clark County's always seemed to be spread out.
Yeah. So a lot of it's exactly, some of it's in the city, some of it's kind of spreading out from there.
And what are you projecting moving forward for Clark County in terms of growth and wage growth and population? Is it going to continue this robust? This whole area is just going crazy.
Well, I think so, and I think the waterfront proposal development in particular is going to kick off a fair amount of development. We'll see more, I think, more office space downtown as an alternative within the metro area. That'll be lower cost. Okay. So the tax differential is significant for some people, and if you're looking at industrial siting, it pencils out better north of the river for some industries and south of the river for others in terms of just purely looking at taxes. Okay. But with no income tax, but with a sales tax, of course, we don't have the retail development. Right. But for some businesses that have a higher income end. The other cool thing that's happening, is that really for the first time we've got a growing small sector of startups around tech.
Okay.
And a lot of it in downtown Vancouver, which we hadn't seen before. And they're finding each other and starting to network, and I think that's going to lay the groundwork for
kind of the revitalization of that downtown that's taken, because
yeah, which has come a long way, let me tell you.
No, it has. No, it's changed. It's just it's been a slow process in terms of where it's been, and they've tried different things. And like you said, the Boise Cascade site will be something to kind of kick that off. Historically, it used to be job growth in Clark County. We would say to apartment developers and investors, if you're a manufacturing company, if I'm going to employ middle wage earners, or it's better to go to Vancouver because of the the no income tax. They can take advantage of the no sales tax by coming across the river to do their shopping. But now you're starting to see it because of the I think tightness in Portland. Rents are a little below there, so I think you'll see some growth that way as well.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
And how and then the other thing I was going to ask about Washington, some of the campuses that have come down, satellite campuses. What have you seen? What's the effect on that on the economy, so to speak, from like a Washington State coming down with that camp?
Oh, yeah, that's been big as well, and they were expanding very steadily until the downturn, and
right.
And I think that'll start to pick back up again with the state recovering and more money in the coffer, that they'll be able to put more into that higher education budget. They're still in a kind of a recovery mode at that level, but I think that'll help in the future. Clark College, as a community college, is also expanding with satellite offices. They've got property in north part of the county that they're planning on expanding on. So, and that's also huge for those kind of employers that are really want and need that kind of university access.
Right. And
make a difference.
Historically, we've seen is just from the. I don't want to get into details, but the funding seems better for primary and secondary education in Washington State than Oregon, more steady. And this, Vancouver, Clark County's got a better, I don't want to say better, but a more funded, stable school system, which I think has driven some families to go north in terms of housing.
And there's a court case that's come down to actually force more K-12 funding.
Oh, really? Okay.
Yeah. And that's just being implemented in this legislative cycle, that they've had to move funds into K-12.
Interesting, okay.
We'll, see even more, I think, stability in the school funding and a higher level of school funding than there has been before.
And what about the availability of land? We've got the urban growth boundary within the 3-county area within here. Clark County is not probably part of that, but what's the availability of land?
But there is a growth management act,
right,
so it's similar in a lot of ways to what happens over here with Metro. And their challenge is the balance between housing and commercial and industrial. And historically, that's been really tilted towards housing, and some land that should have been industrial, right on a freeway interchange, went residential, and you can't undo that.
Okay.
So really throughout the metro area, I think there's a shortage of industrial land, and that's going to be a challenge for all of us.
And then because of the tax structures we've talked about, you're always going to be from a submarket to submarket, probably lighter on the retail side.
But in some cases, there's land there, but getting the parcels in and put together is just a logistical challenge.
Anything down the horizon in terms of Clark County that's kind of you're really keeping an eye on for this year and going into next year? Just as tracking this, see how the momentum's maintaining.
Yeah, no, to me, it's kind of a good steady growth path we're on, and I don't see anything locally that would get in the way of that. It's more you worry about the external, China or what's happening in Europe. Okay, that kind of thing.
Can derail some of the Well, thanks again for coming. It was very enlightening, and we'll see you again next time on HFO-TV. Thank you.
Thanks for
that was great. Thank you.
Our entire office specializes in multifamily real estate, making HFO the largest multifamily brokerage in the Pacific Northwest. Your success is our passion. Build your legacy with HFO. Call 503-241-5541 or visit our website at hfore.com for more information.